Hi everybody, Ash here from the Charity Gaming Guild, bringing you Module 3 in our Character Creation Masterclass. In this module we're going to look at class and subclass choices, what you have available to you, and we're also going to look at making a plan for your character. Now this is going to be a long module, so go and grab yourself a brew, grab yourself some biscuits, sit down and get ready for us to go through each of those class choices to make sure you can find the right choice for your character. So the first thing I want to talk about is making a plan. It's too easy just to start at level 1 and make your way through and have no clear direction where you want your character to go. Now you should, if you follow this masterclass, have a premise, so you're most of the way to having a plan already. But when we come to actually put those classes together, there's a way that we can do it to make sure that our premise works and our character goes in the direction that we want it to and think it will. Now there are two different approaches to this depending on the type of game that you're going to play. If you're playing a one-shot adventure, you'll just create your character at the level that the one-shot adventure is at. Normally, in a one-shot, you're not going to level up. However, if you're playing a campaign or one of our larger events where you are going to level up as the day progresses, then I would strongly recommend making your character initially at level 10. The reason for this is it gives you a good idea as to what your character can actually do. It means you can check and make sure that your character actually does what you think it's going to do and it meets your premise in the way that you think it should. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to stick to this route. If you start at level 10 and then you have to level it down for the start of the campaign, which is not unusual and something you'll probably have to do, you do not have to follow that same route. But it gives you an idea, it gives you more information, and it gives you more knowledge about what it is that your character is out to achieve. Dungeon Masters are fantastic at throwing curveballs, and that may well happen, and there may be some character development that means you don't want to even follow the same class anymore and you want to multi-class into something else. Absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Organic character development is really, really important in Dungeons & Dragons. So, make your character at level 10, and that's what we're going to do for our character that we're going to be creating alongside this masterclass, and then you can always level it down to the correct level that you need it to be. Okay, so we've made a plan and we know what we're going to do. Now we've got the exciting choice of picking a class for our character. Now, in this module, we are only going to look at official Wizards of the Coast classes and subclasses. Those of you who have been part of the Charity Gaming Guild for some time will know that we have our own classes, particularly the Dragon Guard and the Divine Inquisitor classes. We're not going to be looking at those as potential options at the moment. However, we will cover them in a future video when we talk about coming to Charity Gaming Guild events and using the homebrew rule sets that we've created for our own games. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each main class one at a time and talk about every subclass that is currently available for that main class. Now, we're not going to be talking about rules, stats, or anything like that at the moment. We're still talking about ideas and premises that we can use to build that character. Module 1 spoke about that premise, and hopefully in the coming parts of this second part of this module, you'll be able to understand more about the subclasses that are available to you, and you can start thinking about how to tweak and change those to meet your initial premise that you put together for your character. It's important to keep in mind when we go through these classes and subclasses that they are not strictly what they say. You can reflavor things and make things different to fit your premise. By way of an example, I had an artillerist artificer character and reflavored it slightly to enable that gun to become a part of my armour. And that worked, and I worked with the DM to do that as well, and those kinds of ideas are there ready and available for you. So when you take an idea from a class or a subclass, you can reflavor things as long as you don't change the rules and how something works. It really makes no difference whatsoever. So this is where the real meat of this module is going to be. Let's kick off with the first class and the subclasses that are available to it for your character choices. And the first class that we're going to look at is the Artificer. Now remember, we're only looking at the ideas behind the class and the flavour that that class presents rather than the mechanical rules and things that that class can do. So Artificers are masters of inventions. They're arcane creators that take magical energy and create things with it. They can use tools to channel that magical energy in different ways. They do have access to something called infusions, and that lets you effectively make magical items, which is really, really cool, and is one of the sort of prevailing things that an artificer can do. Artificers are half-casters, so they have access to magical spells, but they also have some good proficiencies with tools and weapons, which means they're really quite a versatile class, especially if you're playing in a game where there's a lot of unknowns and you're coming across a lot of unknown items. Artificers really do come into their own. At level 3, you get your Artificer subclasses. Now, for the Artificers, these are called specialists or specialisms, and there are 4 of them for the Artificer class. So the first one's the Alchemist. The Alchemist kind of does what it says in the tin, uses reagents and chemicals to make different potions, which all do different things, and there's some quite cool things you can do there as well. You then have an Armourer. So an Armourer has a customizable suit of magical armour which can do different things in its Guardian or Infiltrator formats, and you can switch those on and off as well. It's not like you have to stick with one, but there's loads of cool ways you can flavour that class. If you look back right the way back to some early modules in the Character Creation Masterclass, we spoke about Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. This is exactly the class he would use for that. There's also the Artillerist. The Artillerist it has a little cannon which can run around on its own and it can fire things. It has different types of shots as well. And again, there's lots of cool ways you can flavour this, as I alluded to earlier on in this video. And the last one is the Battlesmith. Now, the Battlesmith focuses on repairing equipment and gets access to something called a Steel Defender, which is a robotic companion, which you can summon as a Battlesmith to join you on your adventures. Artificers are a lot of fun. They are quite versatile and they can be built in lots of different ways as well. This is probably one of the classes the easiest to reflavour abilities and spells to do different things. And to give you an example, I played an Artificer character in one of Chris's campaigns called Lyle. He was a Centaur Artificer who had a magical suit of armour but wasn't an armourer. He was an artillerist, and the gun was built into his armour. The spells that he would cast would be his armour doing different things. So for example, Fairy Fire had a little flare cannon that would pop out the back and shoot off different coloured flares to illuminate enemies. And there's some great ways there, some examples there where you can flavour spells to meet what it is that your character is designed to do and to make that premise really come to life. So that's the Artificer, and now we're going to move on to the second class. So the second class we're going to look at, one of the classic Dungeons & Dragons classes, is the Barbarian. Everyone knows what a Barbarian is. As soon as you say Barbarian, people have an image in their mind, and that is exactly what they're like. They are fighters defined by their rage. Typically, they're frontline fighters, first into the fray, and their abilities tend to hinge around their rage. So rage is something a Barbarian gets that lets you hit harder, take less damage, and be generally much, much more dangerous. Typically, Barbarians are played as low intelligence, but actually a high intelligence or high wisdom Barbarian can be quite an interesting concept to play. So again, we talk about a flaw. That can be a flaw for Barbarian, being really, really intelligent. It's skewing the norm is what we mean when we talk about that flaw. So at level 3, Barbarians get access to their primal paths, and there are quite a few of them, so get comfy. We're going to have a look at each of them. The first primal path is a path of the Ancestral Guardian. So this is a Barbarian that draws upon their heritage ancestors, and typically these Barbarians will cover themselves in tattoos, celebrating the deeds that their ancestors undertook. In battle they can summon them, and they get a range of benefits for doing that. The next Barbarian primal path is a path of the Battle Rager. Now, Path of the Battle Rager is a dwarf-only primal path, which is really unusual to get a race restriction like this, but it is. What I love about this class is that amongst dwarves they are known as, I'm going to just quickly look at this properly, Kuldjar, which in the Dwarven tongue means axe idiot, which I think is fantastic. But these dwarves cover themselves in spikes and literally throw themselves into the heat of battle to maximise the damage that they can cause to the enemy. The next primal path we're going to look at is the Path of the Beast. These barbarians draw upon a bestial rage that resides deep within. When that manifests itself, it does so as a creature. So you start to get traits come through that relate to that beast, which your rage links to. There's all kinds of options available to you, from claws to teeth to tails. It's quite a fun one if you're quite closely linked to nature. We have Path of the Berserker. Path of the Berserker kind of does what it says on the tin. Berserkers throw themselves into battle with little regard for their own safety and well-being. And they are probably ultimate raging combat machine. They will just rip, tear and kill with absolutely no regard for who it is they're hitting, whether that's friend, foe or even themselves. The next primal path is Path of the Giant, and these barbarians draw their power from the same primal forces that the giants do, and they surge with elemental power, and they can take on gigantic forms as well, changing their size. Some of these barbarians later on in their career, we'll say, can even change their physical form to be an elemental form as they grow. So Path of the Giant's a really fun, flavourful path, which has quite a lot of uses. The next primal path is Path of the Storm Herald. So Storm Herald barbarians release their rage in the form of primal magic. And when you take this path, you can pick the type of storm that you want your barbarian to wield, or options being desert, sea and tundra. And you can release this energy as part of your rage, allowing you to cause even more damage. We then have Path of the Totem Warrior. So Path of the Totem Warrior barbarians accept spirit animals as guides, bear, eagles, elks, tigers or wolf animal guides, and you can harness their power as they go about their adventure, drawing on their abilities to supplement the barbarian's own. The Path of the Zealot, so Zealot barbarians dedicate themselves to a god or higher power and become a fighting force for that god specifically. And the last primal path is Path of Wild Magic, which is my personal favourite. So barbarians who are touched by wild, uncontrollable magics, and when they rage, you can never be 100% certain what's going to happen, but it's going to be cool, it's going to be fun. Path of the Wild Magic for barbarian, and as you'll see later on, there's another wild magic subclass for another class, is fun. It's unpredictable, and it really does make you think on your feet. So into our third class, we have the Bard. Bards are magical performers without peer, masters of eloquence, diplomats or celebrities. They are silver-tongued full casters and can cause no end of problems for dungeon masters. Bards are fantastic. You never quite know what's going to happen with the Bard. Your best laid plans can just be spoken around. That silver tongue is something that Bards are particularly good at, especially throwing a spanner in the works, which is fun, and it really is fun. Level 3, Bards have access to their subclasses. These are Bard colleges, and we're going to have a quick look through the Bard colleges. So, again, there's quite a few of them. For the classic D&D races, you'll find there's quite a lot of subclass options, and it's no different for Bards at their colleges. So we have the College of Creation. These Bards teach about the world's creation through medium of song, dance and poetry, sharing the lessons that before the world there was song. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. For our world of the Allhavens, you can make that decision for yourself by picking up Book 3, Dark Ascension, which has the creation of the world in it. So, there's a little plug there for you. We then have the College of Eloquence, which are silver-tongued talkers. The College of Eloquence are masters of persuasion who wield a dangerous combination of logic and theatrical wordplay to win over others. These are the guys that can talk around pretty much anything. And in role-play situations, they really do throw a spanner in the works, but you can end up with some hilarious situations because of a College of Eloquence Bard. We have the College of Glamour, so these are bards who hone their skills in the Feywild under the tutelage of Fey creatures. So, Fey creatures are things like satyrs or Eladrin, which are special types of elves that live in the Feywild, and this is great if you've got a Fey Bard character. It's a really fun and flavourful way of getting more out of your premise. I have the College of Law, and these bards know something about everything. They collect knowledge from all sources and are dedicated to the pursuance of beauty and truth. College of Law, it sort of does what it says in the tin, really. College of Spirits, these bards conjure spirits, but they have limited control over them as they manifest onto the material plane. Again, another fun one. College of Swords, they're College of Swords, so they entertain through daring feats with weapons. Sword swallowing, knife throwing, juggling, and mock combat are all used to entertain. But these highly skilled bards are true warriors in their own right. You want to play a professional wrestler in Dungeons and Dragons? That's the class for you, College of Swords. And then we have the College of Valor, so recalling tales of mighty heroes of the past and inspiring the latest generation of heroes. College of Valor bards play a vital part in ensuring the effectiveness of their peers. So I think that's pretty clear what that's designed to do. That's designed to support the rest of the party. And there is one more college, the College of Whispers. So infiltrating into accepting communities, these bards are taught they are wolves among sheep. They use their knowledge of magic to uncover secrets and turn others to their own will and way. So this is perhaps more of a chaotic or even evil-aligned bard. Would be a great way to play this. Although I have said earlier to steer away from evil-aligned characters, but this would be typically a chaotic or selfish, perhaps, bard who can really sow the seeds into communities and get what they want for the party. So the next class we're going to have a look over is the Cleric class. Now these are healers and warriors. They are the scourge of the undead and intermediaries between the mortal world and the plane of the gods. These are full casters. They are typically support casters, but aren't unable to deal a lot of damage. They can still be quite damaging in their own unique way. They are also slightly unique in that they get their subclass options at level 1, which are called the Divine Domains. We're going to have a quick whiz through those Divine Domains now. There are quite a few of them. There's the Arcana Domain, which is the worshipping of gods of magic and using the energy of the gods to cast their spells. The Death Domain, fairly obvious what that is. Forge Domain, which is all about creation and invention. The Grave Domain, which are clerics that watch over and guard graves and areas of hallowed ground. The Knowledge Domain, Life Domain, Light Domain, and Nature Domain, all again fairly self-explanatory. The Order Domain looks after law and philosophy. We have the Peace Domain, the Tempest Domain, a lot like some of the other subclasses we've seen. The Trickery Domain. So the Trickery Domain clerics challenge the accepted order of things. They worship the patron gods of thieves or gamblers or scoundrels. We have the Twilight Domain and the War Domain. So the subclasses for the cleric are quite self-explanatory. As I said before, we're not going into the intricacies of each class at the moment. That will be maybe a later video and a much longer video. But we're trying to give you the classes and subclasses so you can start thinking about how these link into your premise. So that is the clerics. Next up on the list are druids. Druids have an affinity to nature, the world and everything in it, and they draw on this nature to unlock their own power and potential, striving to preserve the balance between all of the elements. So there's a lot of elemental stuff that comes through from druids. They are full casters and they have a unique ability to shapeshift into animal forms. And they also are slightly unique in that they get their subclass at level 2, which are called druidic circles. There are quite a few druidic circles, so let's start going through them. The first one is the Circle of Dreams. These druids have strong ties to the Feywild. They seek to fill the world with the dreamy wonder of the Feywild, so you can expect some interesting abilities in that class. We have the Circle of Spores. That always makes me think back to one of our very early characters, Cersei. You should go and check out some of the older videos to see Aya play a Circle of Spores druid in a fantastic way. But these druids find beauty in death and decay, so expect lots of interactions with mushrooms and fungus, that kind of thing. You have the Circle of Stars, so you can draw your power from starlight, taking constellation forms rather than just wild shapes. So you can take starry form of an archer, chalice, or a dragon, unlocking more abilities for you. Circle of the Land, so the circle is made up of mystics and sages who safeguard ancient knowledge through oral tradition. Magic is then boosted by the land itself, quite a cool one. Circle of the Moon is fairly straightforward, but of course moonlight and the moon itself in lore and in myth and things like that all links to lycanthropy or were-people like werewolves. So there's some wild shape transformation changes under this circle. A Circle of Shepherd, also known as the Scourge of any DM. The reason for this is all about summoning spirits. Shepherd druids are fantastic at creating lots and lots and lots of other creatures, basically. So it's good fun, but it can be a bit of a pain, especially in a larger group. If you are going to be playing in a larger group, and give some serious thought to whether a Scythe or Shepherd Druid is going to meet your premise, or if there's perhaps a better option you can use. Warlocks are also quite good at summoning. And have a circle of wildfire, so those druids believe in the creation that destruction brings. They bond with a primal spirit that harbours both destructive and creative energies. So there's lots of choices with druidic circles. Yeah, lots and lots of choices. There's lots of different ways you can flavour them as well, and there's some great examples of that out on the Charity Gaming Guild's gameplay videos from years and years and years ago now. But give them a watch. So yeah, that's Druids. Let's move on to the next class. Okay, the next class is a big one. We're going to have a look at fighters. So fighter is a really generic term, and you can expect that to be reflected in the massive amount of subclass choices. What it does mean is this class lends itself very well to being reflavoured in a number of different ways. If perhaps you're not wanting to play another class but think you can do it with fighter subclass, then you're going to have more flexibility that way. Fighters lend themselves to most races, if not all races. Fit fighters well. There's different things different races can do with melee weapons and ranged weapons relying on strength and dexterity, which we're going to cover all stats and rules and stuff in the next modules. Don't worry, that's coming. This is a fantastic class. They are frontline fighter melee class with no magical ability unless you take a specific subclass. So again, you've even got flexibility there as to whether you want to use magic or not. At level 3, you get your subclass. It's called a martial archetype. There are a fair few, and we're going to go through them. So we have an arcane archer. Kind of does what it says in the tin. If you're going down a Legolas route, then perhaps you might want to use an arcane archer as your class and subclass choice. Magical bow shooting is always great fun, and there's lots of cool tricks you can do with that too. We then have the Battle Master, so Superior Tactician. You get a lot of different manoeuvres called superiority manoeuvres, which allow you to do a wide range of things from ambushing to bracing to disarming attacks. It's a really good, tactically flexible class that will allow you to bring a lot of utility to the battle and will allow you to act in other ways rather than just hit it until it dies, which is something that you normally will be avoiding with a good DM anyway, but it will give you some more flexibility there. Then have the Cavalier. So the Cavalier excels at mounted combat and has abilities to help support this and make mounted combat even better. It's a cool subclass, but it's a tricky one to pull off purely because you need a horse or a mount of some description. So if you do want to do this, if maybe you're taking, I don't know, trying to think of a premise that might have a horse. Say your premise is, I can't think of a character that has a horse. Woody from Toy Story. He's got a horse. Then make sure you talk to your DM about how that horse comes about and what you can do with it, because you don't want to take these subclass options only to find in the game you can't actually use it. We'll have the Champions. This focuses on raw physical power to hone to deadly perfection. This subclass gets extra fighting style bonuses, improved critical hits, and makes you much more dangerous in combat. It is a very combat subclass, and it is very much you're going to hit better, you're going to hit harder, and you're going to get critical hits more quickly. Again, we'll cover critical hits a bit later on when we start talking about stats and things. And there'll be a gameplay video as well in the future. So the next one is where things start to get a little more interesting. We have an Eldritch Knight. So earlier on I did mention that you can take a subclass and become a half-caster. Well, this is it. This is a fantastic way of bringing some melee and some magic into the game. Have a good look through some of the spells because there's some real great combinations, which I'm not going to give you now because it's not fun that way. You have to go and discover them yourself. Just keep in mind when it comes to spellcasting that you do need to have one hand free for most spells, so keep an eye on that. Again, if you are a real beginner to Dungeons & Dragons, just know that this subclass exists. Keep going through the character creation masterclass, and eventually we'll cover all of those rules, sides of things when we look at spells a little later on. So we're still going with fighter subclasses. There's plenty more. We have a Psi Warrior. So fighters using psionic energy to unleash more damage and more manoeuvres. It's a great subclass. There's a lot of tricks up its sleeves. It's a real fun one to have these psionic powers as a fighter. Psionic is just, I think of it like magic, I guess. It's probably the best way of thinking of what psionic is. Next one, we have a Purple Dragon Knight. So flavour-wise, this subclass has its roots elsewhere in other settings, but it can easily be reflavoured into any setting, really. Essentially, you're just a knight that's an envoy to a higher power and enables others to perform more effectively, boosting your companions as you adventure. We've got 3 more still. We're still going strong with the fighter. We have the Rune Knight, which is a subclass harnessing the magical powers of runes and giants. You can use these to enhance your own fighting capabilities, and these links with giants will allow you to do even more stuff, like get bigger, which is always good fun. Casting enlarge reduce is a fantastic trick to pull in some situations. So yeah, Rune Knight's are good fun. We have a Samurai as well. I've always felt that the Samurai subclass is a bit of a weird one, to be honest, because it's the only subclass I can think of, off the top of my head, that actually relates to something in the real world. Obviously, we know what samurais are, drawing on discipline and effective fighting styles to bring swift death to your enemies, granting you temporary hit points, additional attacks, and some charisma-based buffs as well. Don't feel like you've got to be a samurai if you take the samurai subclass. If those abilities meet your premise, then just reflavour them. Equally, if you're playing, I'm going to put a really obscure reference here, Musashi from Shining Force, some of you will know who that is, and if you don't, it's a Sega Mega Drive game that you should absolutely have a look at. Well, then you'll pick this subclass because it just makes perfect sense. So the last one for the fight is the Echo Knight. Now this is probably my favourite fighter subclass. You get an Echo, which is a bit like a shadow, which you can switch places with, see through its eyes, and even attack through it. If your premise is Peter Pan, this is a great one for Peter Pan's shadow. So yeah, the Echo Knight is a lot of fun, a lot of shenanigans you can have with this subclass, and it's one to watch as well if a fellow player has it. So that's the fighter and the million subclasses, and no doubt we're going to get some more in the future as well. So there's plenty of versatility in there. So start thinking about what your premise is, and if any of those meet your premise. Okay, on to the next one. So we're going to look at the monk. Monks are martial artists without peer. Some of them still use weapons, and we'll talk about those, particularly for one of the subclasses. So don't feel like you have to be a fist fighter to be a monk. There are still weapon options available to you. The defining feature of monks are key points, which are special points which you can use to do special things like extra attacks, extra movement, taking dodge actions, keeping out of trouble. It's a really good utility, really good tool that monks have, which recharges on a short rest. So you get them back quite quickly as well, which is always good. At level 3, monks have access to their monastic tradition, which is what your subclass is called, and there are quite a few monk subclasses. So let's have a look at them. First one is the Way of Mercy. So these monks manipulate the life force of others to bring aid to those in need. They could be part of a religious order or healers, or others who bring aid to those who need it. However, for those who are beyond their help, they will ensure a swift end as an act of mercy. Brutal, absolutely brutal. They will heal, but if you're beyond their healing capabilities, you're just going to be put out of your misery. A lot of fun to play. Be careful, make sure you're not going to butt heads with your parties. If one of your party members goes down and you can't heal them, don't be punching them in the head until they die and have to roll a new character, because that's not fun for anybody, apart from you. So just keep it in mind. Think about character development arcs and things like that. Again, we'll talk about all of that when we come on to the backstory part of character creation masterclass, but it's quite cool. We then have the Way of Shadow, so think ninja. This is all about stealth and subterfuge, which is a fantastic way of playing a monk because they are so quick. We have Way of the Ascendant Dragon, so this is linked to the god Bahamut. In Bahamut's lore, initially he described himself as a monk and set up a monk temple, and this is kind of the legacy that he left behind. This subclass unlocks the power of dragons within the monk, which is great, especially if you're playing some kind of martial artist thing. Then, yeah, dragon powers are cool. We then have the Way of the Astral Self. These monks believe the body is an illusion, and they see the key as a representation of their true form. So this has lots of use for key and lots of extra stuff you can do with it. We then have my personal favourite and a class I'm playing at the time of recording right now, until Stuart kills him again. Way of the Drunken Master. So this tradition teaches its students to move with jerky, unpredictable movements of a drunk. This is a lot of fun to play. Lots and lots of mad movement shenanigans with this guy. And if you get hit by a monster, you've probably done something wrong. Or at very least it'll be a ranged attack or a spell. This guy is fast, like really fast. And there's a lot of fun can be had with that, especially in the role play elements. Don't fall into the trap though of Drunken Master. You have to play it as a drunk. You don't. Do some research into some martial arts films and see what you find. But essentially, this is a monk who hides his abilities. It's the best way to think of the monk, Way of the Drunken Master. We then have Way of the Four Elements, so harnessing the power of the four elements. I've got a really good example of how I've reflavoured this subclass before. There's a Loxodon, which is a race choice, which is an elephant person. And I played a Loxodon monk for I think it was one of Andy's test games when he was first starting out as a DM. And I reflavoured Way of the Four Elements to Way of the Four Elephants. A subtle difference, but given that I was playing a Loxodon, one that worked quite well. So that's an example there of how you can take a subclass and just rename it and just reflavour abilities. And rather than elements coming to the fore, then it was elephants that were coming to the fore instead. So there's lots of subtle ways you can do it, but mechanically it didn't change a single thing, just how things looked and felt. And that's exactly what we should be doing when we're thinking about reflavouring classes and subclasses. So, we have Way of the Kenzai, which uses weapons. They believe the weapons are extensions of their own body. I mentioned earlier that you can have monk weapons, and most monks can use monk weapons, but the Kenzai monastic tradition gets more access to that. We then have Way of the Long Death. These monks have an unhealthy obsession with the meaning and mechanics of dying, and they capture creatures and prepare elaborate experiments to better their understanding of death. So if you're playing a slightly mad, crazy character who's a little bit too into death, then this is an option if you don't fancy going down the wizard necromancy route, which is also an option. Be something else to bring to the table. Two more subclasses amongst quite a few. We have Way of the Open Hand, so Masters of Arms and Armed Combat. They learn techniques to study the enemy. So we've got two more subclasses to go for the monks. The first one is Way of the Open Hand. These are Masters of Armed and Unarmed Combat, and they learn techniques and study their enemies so they can get the upper hand. So you can expect lots of checks against enemies to see what they're doing and see if you can beat them in combat. And the last one is Way of the Sun Soul, which, as the name suggests, is all about unleashing bolts of light and light energy to bolster your attacks. So that's the monk. Lots and lots of choice, lots of subclass options there as well. Lots of versatility with the monk class is another one that I think is easily reflavoured. So give some thought to those and see which of those meets your premise. So the next class we're going to have a look at are paladins. Paladins are devoted religious warriors and characterised by their damage dealing magical ability called Smite. Smite allows them to tap into their half-caster magic and then deal extra damage on top of what they would ordinarily do, making paladins quite a formidable enemy to come up against. At level 3, paladins get their subclass, which is their Sacred Oaths, and we're going to have a look at what those Sacred Oaths are now. So the first one is the Oath of Conquest. So these paladins seek glory in battle, defeating their enemies. They don't just establish order, but they destroy everything and anything that stands in their way. Oath of Devotion paladins is the next subclass. They hold themselves to the highest level of conduct and believe that the rest of the world should do the same. So there's some potential for some interesting RP moments, particularly if you find yourselves in a party with some chaotic members. Typically rogues will fall into that category. Oath of Glory paladins believe that them and their companions are destined for glory and greatness, and they'll go to any length to find out what that glory is. Oath of Redemption paladins only use violence as a last resort. This can make them quite challenging to play, but can make them quite enjoyable as well, meaning that you're not going to charge headlong into battle, but you're going to look for other options or alternatives before charging headlong into battle and ultimately killing whatever stands in your way. We then have the Oath of the Ancients, sometimes referred to as Fey Knights, Green Knights, or Horned Knights. These paladins dedicate themselves to the fight against the darkness, and they utterly dedicate themselves to that as well. So that can be an interesting subclass to play with some good backstory hooks there. We have Oath of the Crown, which, as the name suggests, the paladins who align themselves to some kind of sovereign or leader, standing guard on the walls or being part of the army. They're often referred to as Watchers or Sentinels. The next oath is the Oath of the Watcher, which protects the mortal realms from extraplanar creatures, and that includes hunting down and stopping the cults that summon those creatures to the mortal realms. The Oath of Vengeance, these are paladins that are committed to punishing someone, something, or a group of people who have committed a grievous sin. These paladins are incredibly violent in combat, and are quite a force to be reckoned with. And lastly, in a change to all of the above, we have the Oathbreaker Paladin. The Oathbreaker Paladin is a paladin who has broken that oath. So perhaps it's a Vengeance Paladin who's turned away from punishing those who've committed a grievous sin, and generally this is to pursue a dark ambition or an evil power. So next class we're going to look at our rogues. Rogues are spies, assassins and thieves. They're sneaky, stealthy characters with a fantastic stealth bonus. They're also really useful in dungeons for finding things like secret doors, traps, hidden treasures, all those kinds of things. The defining characteristic or ability of the rogue class is their sneak attack bonus. This is a bonus that allows them to deal additional damage if a number of factors are met. And as I said before, we're not going to go into the mechanics of what that is right now, but just know that if you are choosing a rogue, if that meets your character premise, then you're going to be able to do more damage in certain situations, which involve working with your party. At level 3, you get your roguish archetype, which is your subclass. So let's have a look at what those are. The first one is the Arcane Trickster. So this turns you into a half-caster with some magical ability, much in the same way that an Echo Knight does for the fighter class, as we've already discussed. This will allow you to take some magic into the rogue class, and there are some cool things you can do there as well. You then have an Assassin, does what it says in the tin really, deadly attacks against enemies who can't see you or don't know that you're there, and ideally infiltrating and killing specific enemies. We then have the Inquisitive. So the Inquisitive excels at rooting out secrets and unravelling mysteries, so something of an investigator with a really sharp eye for detail. There's a Mastermind Rogue who focuses heavily on people and influencing them through the secrets that they have. These rogues believe that words are weapons. We have Phantom Rogues. So these rogues walk a fine line between life and death, taking the life of those that they kill and taking the essence and storing it ready for use later on. It's pretty grim when you think about it, but it's quite cool. We then have Scouts. Scout rogues are skilled at surviving beyond the city limits. They quite often ambush as spies or bounty hunters out in the wild. There's a Soul Knife Rogue, and we've already mentioned psionic powers once, we're going to mention them again here. Soul Knife Rogues use these psionic powers to conjure psionic weapons and attack with them, meaning that you can never be truly without a weapon as a Soul Knife Rogue. We then have a Swashbuckler, typically a pirate, but essentially a duelist, focused on the art of blade and relying on speed, elegance and charm. Swashbuckler always has that pirate connotation, and yeah, it's a good fun one to play, and one that you see come up quite a lot. And the last type of rogue is a thief, and that does exactly what it says in the tin. You can do a bit of parkour as a thief, and surprisingly enough, you're very good at stealing things. So that is the rogue class. Let's have a move on to the next one. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the class list now. The next class is a Sorcerer. So a Sorcerer is a full caster class, meaning it has spells from level 1 all the way up to level 9 eventually. Sorcerers gain the magical ability through natural means rather than other means. We'll find out with Wizards and Warlocks in just a moment. But they have to learn how to harness that raw magic, and as they progress up levels, this gets easier through use of their meta magic options. Meta magic allows them to control their magic in better ways, allow them to cast spells more quickly, more carefully, or just having more targets for those spells. At level 1, you get your Sorceress Origin, which is your subclass. So let's have a look at what they are. So the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. So this means an alien influence has wrapped its tendrils around your mind, giving you psionic powers. Psionics are back. And this origin does include some cool sort of mind-linking telepathy kind of things, as well as the general magic. There's a Clockwork Soul, which is the cosmic force granting your magic comes from a realm shaped entirely by clockwork efficiency. For those of you who have some awareness of Dungeons & Dragons, typically Modrons make quite an appearance within a Clockwork Soul sorcerer's background, but there are some other options there as well. We then have a Divine Soul Sorcerer, where this innate magical ability comes from a god. A Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer, which is a dragon magic sorcerer. This is quite cool because you can pick the different colour of dragon, which also means you can change what your specialism is as a sorcerer. So you could have red for fire, blue for lightning, etc, etc. And certainly if you've got access to Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, which we looked at in the previous module, there's no reason you couldn't take some cues from there as well and make something really cool and interesting. We then have Lunar Sorcery. Now this pretty obviously links to the moon. But what is quite cool with this one is it allows you to choose the phase of the moon, which changes some of the spells that you know. So you can choose a full moon, new moon, or crescent moon as part of your Sorcerous Origin. We then have a Shadow Magic Sorcerer, so this magic comes from the Shadowfell. You won't hear us talk about the Shadowfell too much in the Charity Gaming Guild because we have the Shadow Havens, which is looked after by our very own War Council DM Stuart. And as he would tell you, it is an absolute nightmare of a place. And the magic and Sorcerous Origin that comes from the Shadow Havens or Shadowfell reflects that. Then have Storm Sorcery, which is pretty much what it says on the tin. It's magic that comes from tempest, storms, or elements. And the last one, and probably my favourite Sorcerous Origin, is the Wild Magic Sorcerer. Similarly to a Wild Magic Barbarian, Wild Magic Sorcerers, that was a mouthful, Wild Magic Sorcerers lose control over their magical energy and crazy things can happen. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. We finished up a campaign not too long ago on a Tuesday night where we had a Wild Magic Sorcerer, which was Hattie of the Bogs, and all kinds of things happened to that poor woman. She turned into a potted plant once, there were loads of flumps that got summoned everywhere. She went up into the astral realm and fell from space back down to Earth. She's grown, she's shrunk, she's aged, she's turned invisible, all kinds of things. It's really, really fun. It can be challenging if you're trying to do something and the wild magic kicks off, but it's really good fun. Sorcerers are powerful magic users, and there's a lot you can do with those Sorcerous Origins as well to reflavour that magic in slightly different ways. So the next class we're going to look at are Warlocks. So Warlocks are magic users, but they have their power gifted by a higher being. This means they are incredibly powerful. Whenever they cast a spell, they cast it at maximum power every single time. But unlike sorcerers or wizards, they have a very low number of spells they can cast before their resources are depleted. The most famous sorcerer in the All Havens, not sorcerer, the most famous warlock in the All Havens was, of course, Zaphon, before his ascension or descension to hell as one of the gods of the world. And it is a great class to play. It requires a little bit of finesse because you only have a few spell slots, but you'll obviously have your cantrips, which are your really low-level spells, which you can fall back on all the time. At level 1 for a warlock, you pick your otherworldly patron, and that is your subclass. So let's have a look at what those are. We have the Archfey, so taking a patron from the Feywild. The Feywild can include some pretty tricky creatures, as those of you who came to Masquerade of the Fey will know, but it can lead to some interesting Fey shenanigans with your warlock. We have the Celestial, drawing power from a god. We have the Fiend, drawing power from a demon or a devil. We have the Genie. The Genie one is a good fun one where you become basically a mini genie, which is quite nice. And you can pick a different type of genie as well, and that will change the types and effects that your magic has. We have the Great Old One, which is a mysterious entity whose nature is utterly foreign to the fabric of reality. This can be quite useful if you're going into a new world, you don't know a lot about it, don't have a lot of information, but want to play a warlock. Then the Great Old One means you can take something from somewhere else and bring it into this other setting. We have the Hexblade, which again is drawn from the Shadowfell. These warlocks will typically curse people and then have weapon attacks as well as spells to do damage. The Undead, which is pretty obvious, having an undead patron. Could be something like a powerful lich, which pops up every now and again. And we have the Undying, which means death has no power over the patron who has unlocked the secret to everlasting life. Which I guess essentially means maybe when you reach level 20, you will also have the secret to everlasting life as a warlock of the Undying. So there we go, that's Warlocks. Quite simple, but quite tricky to use effectively, but also a lot of fun. And don't forget as well, if you are going to pick a Warlock and you're playing in one of our Charity Gaming Guild games, the All Havens, Warlocks are very, very illegal, and you're likely to be attacked on sight. So try and keep that to yourself. So we come to the last class for us to have a look at, which are Wizards. So Wizards are full casters who learn their magic. They carry a spell book, which is an essential component for you as a wizard, means that you can write your spells in there. They have access to the highest number of spells and the highest number of spell slots, but they are typically very squishy and don't stand up very well in a fight at all. At level 2, you get your Arcane Tradition, which is where you get your Wizard subclass. So we have Blade Singing. So where the Eldritch Knight gave magic to a combat character, this works the other way around. We give a little bit of combat to a magic character. Swordplay and Dance is what a Blade Singer is all about. We then have Order of the Scribes. These wizards are all about writing and transcribing spells. This lets you do all kinds of things with your spellbook. I believe it is Order of the Scribes as well that gives you an awakened spellbook, which means your spellbook is sentient, which is quite a nice, cool little thing to have as well. The next load of classes all link to types of magic and magical schools. So don't worry too much about some of these weird words. I'll try and explain briefly what those kinds of spells are. But what you'll find is they link to a type of spell or a type of magic. So we have the School of Abjuration, which has emphasis on magic which blocks, banishes or protects. The School of Conjuration, which obviously is about manifesting things and bringing things into the material realm, whether that's creatures or items or objects. We then have the School of Divination, helping to give clearer understandings of the past, present and future. School of Enchantment, which is all about charming and beguiling others, which can be quite a fun class to play. We have the School of Evocation, which is all about dealing damage to the enemy. School of Illusion, that's pretty obvious. School of Necromancy, dealing with death, bringing things back from the dead as well. It was all in that school there. School of Transmutation, which is changing the raw properties of physical materials. And then the last one is the School of War Magic, or just a War Magic Wizard, which means you are a trained battle wizard. You're trained to fight in war and cast your spells as part of a larger army. So wizards are really versatile. The schools that link to specific types of magic, like the abjuration, conjuration, etc., are quite open-ended, so you can still put a lot of flavour into those wizards, and there's a lot you can do with that class. It's a really good class, it's a really fun class and gives you access to lots of magic. But whatever you do, don't get hit, because typically your armour class or how much resistance to being hit you have is very low, and also your number of hit points is generally quite low as well. So just be aware of that as you build your wizard. You're unlikely to be a frontline fighter, but you will have plenty of magic which you'll be able to chuck at the enemy left, right and centre. Okay, so we have gone through every class and I've mentioned every subclass, I think. If I missed any, stick in the comments down below and we'll top it up later on. Also, Wizards of the Coast are highly likely to release some extra content, so there's likely to be more built into this. But that gives you a really good overview of the majority of classes. Now, if you're looking at this post 1D&D, so once that's all been released, this still works. Those classes aren't going to go anywhere. We're only going to get more subclasses. It will be the mechanics of things that really change rather than the flavour of things, I think. I don't have that confirmed. That's just my gut feel. So we need to talk about our good friend Lumiere. We need to figure out what we're going to do with him and how we're going to take this character and make him interesting and viable. Now, there's a few options that we could lean into. We know he's going to be a Warforged, okay? So that really has no bearing on our class whatsoever. We think about Lumiere and the way he looks. We're going to have our Warforged giant candelabra, so he's going to have flaming hands, probably a flaming head as well. So we want to maybe look down the line to something to do with fire, perhaps. But also we need to bear in mind what he is. He is a candlestick. So we think about the sorcerer. We have the Clockwork Soul Sorceress origin. That would be really good, perhaps if we were playing as Cogsworth rather than Lumiere. But we're not. We're playing as Lumiere, not Cogsworth. But there's an idea there, isn't there? If you want to switch over to Cogsworth from Beauty and the Beast rather than Lumiere, maybe a Clockwork Soul Sorcerer is the way to go. We could look into an Evocation Wizard. And the damage dealing spells that can deal, but it doesn't really feel right as such. We've already discussed how wizards learn their spells. Well, I don't think Lumiere really learned how to be a candlestick. I think one day, because of the curse, he just was a candlestick and had to just deal with it. So I think it's more of an innate gift. So I think that's why I think the sorcerer or warlock are perhaps better options to allow us to tap into these flaming hands. I'm just going to pull up, I've got my laptop down the bottom here, I'm just going to pull up the Warlock class on D&D Beyond, which is a fantastic platform, by the way. If you're looking at making lots of characters, D&D Beyond is definitely the tool to do it on. So Just having a look through some of those subclasses for the Warlock, I don't think there's anything there that jumps out. Genie Warlock doesn't really work. The Fiend could work, potentially, although Lumiere doesn't actually answer to the witch that put the curse on the castle, that's the Beast. We have the Archfey. I guess a hag. Hag's a fey. So that's an option, but then Lumiere isn't really a fey creature. He's a human that has been transformed into this candelabra. I think we'll lean into Sorcerer. And I think what we'll do is we'll have a look at the Draconic Bloodline. Now this is a fantastic example of how we can take something which on the face of it looks like it shouldn't work and make it work. So Lumiere's Draconic Bloodline, the first thing we do is we'd have to pick a dragon ancestor. So if you remember earlier in this video when I spoke about the Draconic Bloodline, you pick your colour of dragon and that tells you what damage type you're related to. So I've got here, black is acid, blue is lightning, brass is fire, bronze is lightning as well, copper is acid, gold is fire, green is poison, red is fire again, silver is cold and white is cold as well. So perhaps we can lean into this and re-flavour it. So if we were to take a red dragon and have the affinity to fire as our damage type, then we can change things slightly, can't we? We can change how this flavours Lumiere. So Lumiere doesn't really have a draconic ancestry as such, but we're going to take each of these features and change them to make them fit our premise. So we've already got first level, you choose one type of dragon as your ancestor. The dragon type associated with each dragon is used by the features you gain later. So we're going to pick red dragon for fire, because we want the fire part. We don't care about the dragon part, we can just bin the dragon part off altogether. So the next part, we have Draconic Resilience. So as magic flows through your body, it causes physical traits of your dragon ancestor to emerge. At first level, your hit point max increases by 1. Increases by 1 again whenever you gain level in this class. Lovely. That builds into the idea that Lumiere is made of brass, perhaps, or metal of some sort, because he's a candelabra. He has less of this squishy biological matter that me and you are made of. Additionally, parts just going to be covered by a thin sheet of dragon-like scales, and when you aren't wearing armour, it gives you a higher AC. So we're not worried about the mechanic parts of this really at the moment. We're thinking about flavour. So parts just going to cover by a thin sheet of dragon-like scales. Well, it's Lumiere, so perhaps he just has metal skin. That does build into our Warforged as well. There's some benefits there as well for having non-organic skin. We're only going to go up to level 10, as we said in the making the plan part. We're just looking at level 10 at the moment, just to make sure that our premise works. And this is exactly what we mean by that. So that's a Draconic Resilience as a first level ability. The next level that something kicks in for this Draconic Bloodline isn't until level 6. If we look at it now, we can start to plan our character and we can make sure that our premise works. So at level 6, we get something called Elemental Affinity. So starting at 6th level, when you cast a spell that deals damage of the type associated with draconic ancestry, you can add your charisma to 1 damage roll of that spell. At the same time, you can spend 1 sorcery point to gain resistance to that damage type for 1 hour. So we can make Lumiere do more fire damage and be resistant to fire damage. That sounds pretty cool to me. It sounds like it fits our premise. So I think this is the way to go. We need to be looking at a Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer for Lumiere. And when we start picking spells, which we'll do later on as well, we'll start focusing around those fire-based spells. Regardless of how good or how bad those spells are, we're going to really focus on that because that is building into our premise. It's making Lumiere into what Lumiere should be, which is this Candelabra Warforged. Okay, so there we go. We've now got our race, we've got our class, we've got our premise, and we're starting to now build this character. Hopefully you found this useful and there's something there that I've mentioned which can build into your premise and make your character the exact character that you want it to be. So in the comments down below, stick in there what your character is, what class and subclass, and how you're going to flavour that, or how that class and subclass relates to your premise, and how it makes your character even better and even more interesting. And while you're down there commenting, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on so when the next module comes up, you can see that. So the next module, in module 4, is the stats and statistics. This is where we start getting a bit rulesy with our Dungeons and Dragons, and we'll talk about the 6 main stats and what they all mean, and then we'll talk about arrays, point buy and rolled arrays as well. So I hope that was useful. I hope that we're starting to give you some ideas to build some interesting characters, and I look forward to seeing you all in Module 4 for statistics and some rules.